welcome back. I'm Matt, and as you see that some things have changed. I've lost my hair, and I've gained a new co-host, and so I'm gonna let her introduce herself. So this is Sarah. Sarah, welcome to That Sounds Gay. I'm in.
Hi, Matt. And everybody else. My name is Sarah. I lived in Kansas for a good couple decades. My wife and I are now living actually in Minnesota. So I'm coming to you from the frozen white north. And yeah, it looks a little like Hoth outside. I have a background in some integrative civil rights work that we did while we lived in Kansas. My wife is also born and raised in Kansas. And yeah, I've got a little bit of a reputation for getting in good trouble. We just closed we just closed. We had a bookstore in Hutchinson, Kansas that was a great little space that we had to close just a few weeks ago, called Crow and Co. Books. So if you've ever been there, I'm the person that was behind that. We are keeping that going as Crow and Co. to go. That's up here, but we are also going to be trying to do stuff and be still involved in Kansas. Matt can attest to the fact that we are still stirring the shit up in Kansas as much as possible. So yeah, that's a really terrible introduction. You'll get to know more about me over time, I think, but that's the very short of who I am. So
Hey, we are glad to have you. And this week, not just this week, but in the future here, we're going to bring the show back to Kansas because this show is sponsored by LGBTQ Foundation of Kansas. And we're going to bring things more Kansas centered because things have kind of changed since we've done all the previous recordings. Um, we've changed presidents and such since we've done the previous recordings, and so we're going to kind of concentrate on Kansas. And yesterday, before we did this recording, a bill, Senate Bill 63, um, the Laura Kelly had, well, she didn't do it yesterday. She had vetoed this bill, but yesterday the veto was overturned, and we're going to talk about that today. So we're going to
mm.
take a short break for the title card, and we're going to come back and talk about that. All right, thanks for hanging out with us. So we're going to focus on Kansas moving forward, and keep you all up to date on what's going on in Kansas, and try to be a voice for what's going on here, and not just Kansas. We have a lot of things going on politically, Sarah, and
Mhm.
we need people are scared, and
Yeah. Well, and I think Kansas is a really interesting bellwether for the way that the nation is, especially especially Kansas versus Minnesota, right? And so
right,
I think Kansas is an interesting bellwether and an interesting source of uh, uh, the way that national politics is impacting people's lives on the ground in a very real way. And so I think focusing on Kansas is really useful, partially because, like you said, LGBTQ Foundation of Kansas is what we are. So that is critical, but it's also, I think, critical for people to understand both in places that are safe and in places that are less so, how these laws are impacting people across the country. And Kansas is one of those places that had a reputation for a very long time of being very like F authority, right? Like, I mean,
right,
this is John Brown's home. Like, Kansas
right.
is, and
One of my
the way,
heroes, John Brown.
yeah, the way that Kansas has acquiesced to a certain special interest circle, I think, is
Mm-hmm.
also just an interesting and awful um, indicator of the way that people have been hurt and how people respond to being hurt in some ways, and the way that people blame other people or want someone to uh, take out their frustration on. And right now it's the trans community, quite honestly,
Mm-hmm.
because that's that's the um, the first of all, it's a super small portion of the population, and a lot of people, back in the day when there was a lot of segregation going on, you could have whole swaths of white people who had never met a black person before,
Right.
especially with the isolation of of the suburban communities. And when you
Mm-hmm.
have entire communities that are isolated into their little white enclaves, you never see a BIPOC person of any sort. And
Mm-hmm.
so they made really easy outlets for these people are responsible for your lives. And it's going back to that, right? I mean, this DEI stuff is the same outlet. They're saying, oh well, DEI is why you can't find a job, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And
I mean, that's
but
where a
now,
lot of bigotry came from, is because
right,
the people in power didn't want the rich didn't want the poor to realize that there was a lot more poor than the rich, so they had
yeah,
to find
and
somebody
that
to
they have a
blame.
lot more in common. You have a lot more in
Right.
common with,
Yeah, all
um,
of the poor people have things in common, so we have to find somebody to blame. So we find the smallest portion to
mhm.
blame and the smallest minority to blame for all of your problems. So you don't blame the top 1%, so let's blame the bottom 1%
Let's say
and
that these
put all
people are
your
ruining your
focus on
lives.
there
Hmm.
and say that
Yeah.
they're ruining your lives. And that used to be, and that's used to how that's how we really made a model for slavery, was we
Hmm.
put poor white people in charge of black people, and that's how we got cops. And
Yep.
and now we're like, well, we can't have that, so let's blame a different minority, and we've
Yep.
blamed different minorities over time, and right now it's trans people,
Yep.
and that's where our target has been the last few years, is trans people, and it's the
Yep.
same model used over and over again of oppression.
Yeah. And so right now the target's on the back of the trans community because the people in power are like, oh, it's really not super likely that people consciously know another trans person.
Yeah.
And so we can beat down the trans community and say these people are responsible for your problems, these people are corrupting your children, these people are et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's where this is coming from. I mean, not to get into a deep dive before we actually talk about the bill about why trans
Right.
people. That's why, and that's why the LGB. That's why the TIA is dropping off the federal websites too, because
Right.
they get
And
to
we're
throw
going
them
to
under the
do a
bus.
whole episode
Yeah, I think we need to do a
on
whole
that.
episode on that
Yeah,
too.
that's on my list of episodes, is an entire episode on just that topic.
Yeah,
It's just the removal of the TIA and
but but yeah, as a high
TIA.
level, that's if you're asking yourself why the hell is this group being targeted, that's really the long and short of why. It's an
Mm-hmm.
easy group to, because they don't think you know a trans person, they don't think you have one to care about, and if you don't, then it's a really easy, um really fish in a barrel,
Yeah,
um really
it's
easy
giving people
distraction.
somebody to blame,
Hmm.
and unfortunately, it's us.
Hmm.
And I'm sorry, and that's horrible, and it shouldn't be that way.
No.
And um, it's a horrible reason why, but that is the reason why.
Yeah,
Um,
at a high level, I think that is a whole other discussion, but
mhm.
um to address that first, especially since there are just a lot of people that are in this position right now,
Yeah,
and a lot of people who care about people who are in this position right now. that is
right. And we're
that
just
is what's
wondering
happening. It's
why.
a whole long pattern. um And it's a pattern we need to recognize and that we need to understand, to defend each other, because it's not going to stop with, um, you know, it's not going to stop with the trans community.
No.
It's just they're the first fish. And
Right.
we need to be aware of that. Um, but
Right.
anyway,
And they've done it in
I
other
digressed us a
societies
little bit
before.
from the, yeah.
Right. No, no, that's fine. I mean, we have to understand that they've done this in other societies before. I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
you look at Germany, the first thing that Hitler went after was the trans community.
Yep.
You know, this has happened in other. I mean, you know, you go after the smallest portion and you put them in control. You eliminate them. You give people a target, and you know we're the target. So so that's what
Hey.
happened, and that's unfortunate, but that's where we are. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're going to talk about SB63, and then we're going to talk about how we're going to react to it,
Mm-hmm.
and you know how we're going to come together.
Yep.
Because I think that's important also. So we're going to start at the beginning. We're going to end at the end. I think. We're going to end that. You know, because we're not just going to leave you with what happened. We're going to leave you with what you need to
What you
do
can do
about it.
about it.
What
Mm-hmm.
you can do about it. Because we're not going to just leave you with the information and go, good luck. You know, you know.
That's
So stick
pointless. I
around
mean,
because
that's what a
yeah,
lot of people are feeling right now, is like,
mm-hmm.
well, what the fuck can I do about this? Like,
Right,
yeah.
yeah. So we want to give you some things because unfortunately Sarah and I have been through um, these things time and time again in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen these things happen over and over again because we've been in civil rights a little bit in our lives. So
Mm.
so yeah.
God, half my adult life almost at this point.
Mm-hmm. I've always known I was going to be in civil rights.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to read what the Kansas Reflector, because it has the best definition of Senate Bill 63. It says it prohibits healthcare providers from providing surgery, hormones, or puberty blockers to children who identify as a gender that is different from the sex that they were assigned at birth. Healthcare providers who break this law will be stripped of their license. It also prohibits the use of state funds for psychological treatment for transgender children, bans state employees from promoting social transitioning, that's in quotation marks, and outlaws liability insurances for damages related to gender affirming care. So we need to break that down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, so, um, so essentially, this is talking about civil cases.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I believe is the language. So, if a child is provided care from a doctor, somebody can sue the doctor for providing care.
Mm-hmm.
And
And we had said before, it doesn't look like this is limited to parents, which is disconcerting too. Like, the language looks like it's very, very open to who could sue a doctor, and that is also problematic because it's not just the most interested parties, as far as we can tell. It's anyone.
right, which is frightening. Which makes it, and since the doctor can't get liability insurance from the lawsuit, and if they are found guilty for providing care, they can get stripped of their license. It
Mm-hmm.
makes it to where doctors will not want to provide gender affirming care for the child.
Right. And gender affirming care, as far as I remember, I could read in the bill, it's not actually really well outlined, um, which is wild to me to some degree. I mean, they do say something about like, concurrent with the gender you were born with, or something like that, if I recall correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my One of my issues and concerns about this, and one of the things about all of these bills is they write this language and they write it at a national level, And even though it's basically a copy and paste across all jurisdictions that they think they can get it passed in, and even some that they don't think they can get it passed in, the language is really stupid most of the time. Not to make an editorial statement, but um, for example, I underwent some gender affirming care when I was 9 years old, and my period came early. I was on puberty blockers, and it looks like the way this is written technically, if you are a girl, if you were AFAB, born as a female, that would still be allowable. But some of these laws are also written as in as much that, like, gender affirming care also means that, like, you are affirming your own gender. This would be like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it looks like this language was written to account for that to some degree, but it's also just showing how hypocritical it is that if your gender affirming care is that you're on puberty blockers because your period came when you were 8 or 9 years old, then sure, you can be on that for 6 years, until you're ready to have a
Right.
period or whatever.
Right.
But
And you can get gender affirming care if you need breast augmentation or a nose job, as long as your gender assigns with your birth.
hmm
I think that's so hypocritical.
hmm
That because a lot of surgical care for gender affirming care isn't done on trans kids. I
no,
don't think a lot of people know that. A lot of
well,
times
and
it's
and
go ahead.
trans kids don't usually get surgical intervention until they're much older. I mean,
Right.
our
That's what I'm saying.
yeah,
A lot of times, gender affirming care, that surgery done on kids is not trans kids.
no.
It's a lot of times it's nose jobs. It's reducing breast tissue on
hmm
a child that has too much breast tissue and needs to, for back care or
hmm
things like that. Where you're not talking about a lot of, surgical care done on trans kids.
Well,
And
and in fact, like internationally, I think the youngest surgical intervention literally took a state approval. It took Germany's approval because I think it was done on Kim Petras. I think she was the first, and she was like 14. I mean,
oh, okay.
um, don't quote me on that for sure, but that's what I recall. And you're not getting kids that are getting surgery. We're not talking about that. We're
Right.
talking about a haircut. And the thing that pisses me off is that these laws are also impacting like kids that are just like I just, that are gender expansive. Like, right? Like
Right.
kids who are just trying to experiment with who they are and how they want to be. And
Right.
as a culture, we have always kind of indulged kids in their exploration,
Mm-hmm.
um and to not to act like that's now not okay is it's kind of heartbreaking because you're taking
Right.
away childhood exploration of themselves that doesn't hurt them at all. I mean, young kids
Mm-hmm.
are literally just like playing with who they are in a lot of ways.
Right. When my brother was a teenager, he got a perm and wore pink shirts that let his stomach show. And I mean, we're talking about the 80s and 90s,
hmm
but that was him exploring who he was.
Right.
And the language of this would outlaw some of that. And
Yeah.
you have to, like how far are we going to go in dictating kids figuring out who the hell they are?
Right. Well, because I mean, there are kids. The other thing is, you just made me think about the fact that there are kids that are exploring their expression that wouldn't necessarily, in most cases, be considered like the kids aren't necessarily trans. They just like want to be more flamboyant, or they want to be
Right.
um more expansive in who they are. And
Mm-hmm.
now who gets to come down and make those decisions of, well, that's just that's not that's not male enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, there's a lot in these laws. The one thing that really pisses me off about these laws, well, there's many things, but one of the
Right.
things is that they never really properly define anything. um
Mm-hmm.
they just pretend like everyone knows what it is to be a male and a female and yada yada yada. And like, are you going to, is it now illegal to paint a boy's nails?
Right. And I mean, the rules of society, I've never fit in a box.
Hmm.
Being autistic and
Most people don't.
ADHD, I don't, never liked boxes. And most people don't fit in boxes. And the rules of society are so wrong. I don't, I don't like boxes. I don't like rules. And this is, a lot of these laws are saying that there's a set of societal rules that don't exist.
Right.
And I don't like that when they, go, well, there's a set of rules that are just kind of intended here, and but those rules aren't law,
Hmm.
and I don't like intended rules.
Right. Well, because I mean, aside from the medical aspect of this, which is a huge deal, the gender expressive part of this law that basically says we're not, um, basically restricts people from actually respecting different gender expressions of people, of children, is like, there's no definition around what those gender expressions are. I
Right.
mean, I mean, it's not as black and white as, my boy wants to wear a dress to school. Like,
Right.
there's a whole spectrum in there. Um, you know, even in the 80s when the goth subculture was coming around, and you know boys painted their nails, sometimes boys
Right.
wore kilts, they still identified as male, some of them.
Mm-hmm.
But they were also pushing these social norms of what gender looked like for their gender, because they
Right.
were, um, alternate inside the culture. and
Right.
and so the impact of this could be like any sort of alternate cultural expression could come down and hurt people as well.
Right. I mean, you're not just talking about, the social transitioning. You're not just, talking about trans kids. I mean, like, what rules are they going to enforce? I mean,
Hmm.
that's just like a lot of these laws is when you start pushing things on one minority, you're really setting things up to push on other people.
Yep.
When you allow one set of people to be ruled, you're allowing stepping stones for other people to be ruled. Um, and I think with that statement, I think we should pause real quick
Hmm.
for a word from our sponsor, and then we'll come back and talk about that a little bit more.
Hmm.
All right, 1 second here.
Life is about making memories, living fully, and loving freely. But there's one thing you shouldn't leave to chance: your health. The human papillomavirus, or better known as HPV, is a common virus that can lead to certain cancers in everyone. Yes, everyone. Men, women, non binary folks. Virus does not care, and everybody is at risk. The HPV vaccine is safe, effective, and protects you from more than just the virus. It's a shield for your future. Protect yourself and the ones you love, because health is for everyone. Ask your healthcare provider about the HPV vaccine today. Get vaccinated, live protected, live protected.
All right, welcome back. Thank you, Sarah. We were getting ready to talk about how when you start setting up rules for one set of community, it kind of stepstones into other communities. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, you set up. I mean, it's just right?
Hmm. Yeah, and it's that's another thing that concerns me about these bills too is, for example, when SB 180 came down, and Laura and I did a lot of work around SB 180. What was that, 2 years ago? Um,
Yeah, two
and
years
that
ago, I
bill,
think.
when it came through, was simply a definitional bill. Technically, there was nothing written in that bill around enforcement, around what it applied to. That bill was like what, less than a page long.
Yeah, I
And
mean, it was less than a page long, and it said a man was this, a woman was this, and an intersex person is disabled.
yeah, and the intersex person was disabled thing literally only happened because of uh, basically my wife's testimony and then the other doctor's testimony that was like, intersex is a whole
They didn't
different
know what to do with
platform and
her.
you're not even accounting for it, basically.
Yeah, they didn't
And
know what to do with your wife, and they were like, "Oh shit, we got to put her in here somewhere." We didn't know that she
yeah,
existed.
yeah. But the thing is that that definitional law opened up a whole, because of the fact that it was so widely written and so poorly enacted, just like this one. How long is this bill, Matt? Is it a page or two long
So
too?
yeah, I mean it's not long. So let me look at it here. Oh, they actually got it on to the seventh page for signatures.
Oh wow.
So they actually put some work into it.
Well,
But
that's more work than they
it
put in
was
the last one.
well, it's a blanket statement that they've put out for all kinds of states. It was wrote by the is it the Do Not Harm Act. It was wrote by an anti-LGBTQ group called Do Not Harm,
Yeah.
and it's been drafted into all kinds of states.
Yeah,
It's
let's
just
talk
it's a
about that
blanket
really really
statement.
quick. Let's talk about how these bills are written, because I think a lot of people don't understand. Um, there's a lot going on with the way these bills are drafted and passed around the country, and very often, um, what's happening is these national special interest groups are drafting bills, and then they're passing them around uh, to leaders in different states, and they are then presented to the legislature with little to no editing or adjustment at all from state to state to state.
Straight
And
plagiarism.
yeah, well, and it's not even I mean, technically the special interests are allowing these freely because
Yeah, right.
they want to saturate the country with these
Oh
ideals.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And and the issue is that they're also usually written very widely. And then the
Mm-hmm.
states, once they're passed, get to interpret those rules and do with what they will. Now, in the
Well, and they're
case,
written that way. They're
on
written
purpose.
with a way on purpose. I mean, that's their idea. I
Yep.
mean, they do that with great intention. They don't intend for these representatives to modify them very much.
No, that's it's literally passed off as a script that then gets thrown into the legislature, and it gets thrown at the wall. And this is also a way that your money is wasted, because again, these special interest groups write these, pass them around to different states, and then they get to throw them into committee and waste your time on something that actually doesn't affect 95% of the state
Right.
personally. um
Hmm.
and what that ends up doing then is, once they're passed, and in this case, um passed twice over, I guess. um I want to use SB 180 as an example because we know it very well and we know what's
Right.
happened as a result of it.
Hmm.
That bill literally just defined what is a man and what is a woman. And it was intended as a foundational bill, quite honestly, for a jumping off point for the spate of bills that are getting passed right
Hmm.
now.
Right.
And that bill literally just said these two things. If you were essentially assigned male at birth, you were a man. If you assigned female at birth, you're a woman. If it's later found out that you're intersex, then congratulations, you're disabled, which also wasn't defined as far as what it
Mm-hmm.
means um, for everything else. Um,
Right.
I don't want to get too far into how that can impact things, partially because I don't want to give people ideas. But the way that it ended up getting applied after the fact is that the state's attorney general said, cool, so these are the definitions. So we're going to take and start trying to apply this across the board, in spite of the fact that the bill doesn't say that these applications are actually um, these applications are not written into these bills.
Right.
Um, at least
But
in the case of SB
he
180,
he's
it's
such a um yeah, I don't like that dude. I'm gonna put that out there. But if I ever meet him, I'll tell that to his face. But he just
I'd like to
ran
do a
with
little
that,
of
and
that.
he's like, "This bill means this, this, and this," and we have like all kinds of lawsuits against that, and and it's going up the chain, and we hope to win in the end. Let's really hope. Um, you know, um, and
but but what it does is then it creates um, this huge amount of waste, because then we have to decide what these bills mean and how they apply.
right,
And the impact can become that when, for example, you apply a binary in this case, um, you end up defining people out of their own civil rights.
right.
Um, and
That's a
that's what's
good
going to,
statement right there.
yeah, and that's exactly what's going to happen to these children as well, because there's no actual accountability written in for different ways in which um, children express themselves in the case of this bill.
Hmm.
There's no accountability written in, because these are not things that we should be, these are not the business of the state, quite
Right,
honestly. And um, just like, there's just too much variation. You can't you can't say X is X and Y is Y when there's also X X Y Y X Y Z.
hmm,
There you can't write in that blue is blue and red is red when there's an entire spectrum.
right.
Um, and that's what these laws are attempting to do, and they're not practical. They're not practical. They're intended to just muddy the waters, really, and
Hmm.
distract people from bigger issues that actually should be mattering to us. And they
Right.
should be mattering to us as um, a united front. And um, yeah, I'm not sure where I was
Yeah.
going with that.
That's. I
My
mean,
ADHD train just derailed.
and
So
that's one of the things that a lot of people spoke out about this, and I'm not going to do. Well, I might, but I was. There's a lot of quotes on Kansas Reflector about this, but this is one of the first things that got passed through, and we're not talking about the economy. We're not talking about health care for everybody. We're
mhm.
talking about restricting healthcare. We're not talking about expanding healthcare. That got shut down in
Yeah,
Kansas.
Medicaid
That got shut
expansion
down.
just literally got kicked out
It
the
got
window
shut down.
again.
So we're restricting healthcare. We're not expanding healthcare. We're
Mhm.
not taking care of the rising prices. You know, we are. What are we fixing in Kansas? We had all these promises from these representatives, and out of all of this so far, we're hurting. people. We're not helping Kansas. What are we doing to improve Kansas with this bill?
Right. Well, because what it'll end up doing is it'll end up moving people from Kansas. And it's not
Yeah.
just the people that are directly impacted, right? It's not
Mhm.
just the parents and families of trans kids
Mhm.
or trans people that are going to end up leaving. It's going to be people who are disgusted with the fact that all of this smokescreen has been deflecting from improving their quality of life. It's going to be, we talk a lot in Kansas about brain drain and the frustration of brain drain in rural communities. And a lot of that brain drain comes from the fact that people are more interested in hurting each other than helping each other. Quite honestly, they're more interested in saying um, that in picking at each other and dividing themselves into these stupid classes that don't build the community. And when you do that, people get sick of it. Regardless, in some cases, regardless of whether they're directly impacted or not, they're going to get sick of the focus on all of this hateful crap. And they're going to be like, I'm going to go someplace where I don't have to deal with listening to Edna complain about the gays every Saturday at
Right.
I you know, and that's yeah. I that's one thing that really frustrates me is they don't understand that that is a big
Yeah. We're
impact
talking about
on why people don't
businesses
want to
leaving
live there.
Kansas too.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, not just people. We're talking businesses. We're talking money.
Mhm.
People are picking up and relocating. We're talking about community members
Yeah.
are leaving Kansas by the fistfuls because they're fed up with this shit. They're
Yep.
done.
Yeah.
They are going to safe states. Kansas is
Yep.
not a safe state anymore. I've tried to make it that, and I can't
Mhm.
pretend that it is anymore. I want it to be. I full heartedly want it to be, but it is not right now, and I can't pretend that it is.
Well, yeah, and I mean, whether you're directly impacted or not, people get tired of the bullshit. They get
It
tired
is
of,
it's very true.
yeah, and yeah, but yeah, I mean, well, yeah, you're kind of sort of talking about us. I know. Um,
Well, I'm talking about you and
but
others too.
yeah, I mean, we're not the
I
only
mean,
ones.
you and I have talked about others that are looking at relocating out, and I have talked about people that are looking at funding, people that want me to direct them to your wife to talk about relocating, and I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I didn't want to leave out of the state, out of the country because they're fed up with all of this, and I mean, and I don't blame them. I mean, this is hard,
Yeah,
and
and quite honestly, there are other states that are taking advantage of this opportunity, which it is.
oh
Let's
yeah,
not
I
lie.
mean,
It's a huge opportunity to be able to pull people from states who are tired of this or who are directly impacted. And there are the state of Minnesota is one.
yeah,
Um,
oh
there
absolutely,
are resources in this state that say if you are a trans person, if you are a parent of a trans kid, we are going to set you up with resources and get you in touch with people who can help you move here, you know?
yeah,
And
and I mean, and so these states are going. We appreciate who you are, and we have states that are saying, otherwise, and that's hard when you love a state like I do. Like I love Kansas,
mm-hmm,
and I want Kansas to be a state like Minnesota, and I will stay here and fight until it is.
right.
And I'll be damned that if it won't ever. I mean, I'm only 43 years old, and I will fight and fight and fight, and I will keep fighting these laws. And one of the things I want to say on this is the foundation just got a grant, and we just put the money in the bank today. If you want to go and speak in front of legislation, in front of bills like this, we don't have any more like this right now, but things
Thankfully.
happen.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always anti-abortion, other bills that might interest you,
Mm-hmm.
that pop up. And if those do pop up, and you want to go and testify, but you don't have the gas money or the food money or stuff like that, we got a grant to be able to send you to Topeka, and help pay for those kind of things. So you can
Mm-hmm.
reach out to us, and we can negotiate that, and give you some money to help you to be able to go and testify and cover some of those costs. So we were able to do that, secure that.
Yep.
I wish we were able
And
to secure that before SB63. We were
yeah,
not, unfortunately, but we do have that money now. We got $1,000, so we can use that up to that amount. Um, and so, if you are interested in, if you see something come up, even if it's not anti-LGBTQ, um, then reach out to me. Our email is on all of the posts, and
yeah,
so yeah,
and yeah,
so reach out,
that's
and we
important.
can yeah, I mean, because we don't want the same 7 8 people testifying every time. We want fresh faces, and
Yeah,
so that
and
makes a difference.
it does. It also makes a difference to be able to have folks, even if you don't come all the way to Topeka, to be um, shouting from the rooftops your feelings about these laws. It's also very important. And talking to your representatives directly as much as you can, saying, look, why are you wasting? And honestly, let's be honest, a lot of them really, I don't, I think that our testimonies in committee are proving how little they care about the people. Because, like, the testimony for this past bill, there were just hundreds of actual local Kansans who came and said, this is going to negatively impact my life. And the level of care was depressing. But
It was.
I think one of the things that we need to strategically have conversations about when we talk to these people is not just, this is going to make my life harder. Let's hit them in the pocketbook and say, you're going to be wasting money on this. Because we are going to continue to fight this. Oh, that's pretty. We are going to continue to fight this. Um, and you're going to be stuck in committee on something when we could be having conversations about things that actually help Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about, like, how much money the attorney general spends tied up in court cases around this stuff, um, Zelda's very interested in you right now.
Yeah,
Um,
Zelda's interested.
Court is expensive. I don't know if people
Mm-hmm.
understand how expensive it is to take things all the way to the judiciary system. I mean, it can cost
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars to defend these laws. Um, and at the end of the day, that's money that's not going to you. That's money that's not going to farm bills. That's money that you are paying in on taxes that is not actually going to enrich your life in any way whatsoever. All it's doing is fueling the court costs and tying up the courts with things that are not actually going to impact the majority of Kansans in any positive manner whatsoever. And
Yeah,
and
that's
I think
valuable.
that I think that it's important for us to take our arguments not just to, how can you be so cruel, because quite honestly empathy is not working for a lot of these people. And
Right.
maybe our tactic at this point is, how can you waste our money this way? Why are
Right.
you wasting our money having these conversations that are going to impact, I mean, when we talk about the sports bill that passed around the same time as SB 180, at the time I don't think there was a single trans person in high school or college sports in the
There's
state of
three.
Kansas. There were
Two were
3.
bowlers, and one was a track star. Two played on a non-gender sport, and one ran track. And after that passed, I sat in a 2-hour meeting with her mother as she cried, and my heart broke.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my
And
God, that was
but if
horrible. Her mother, I just, yeah, because it affected that one. We passed a law for one student.
yeah, and it was literally just a lot. And people come back by and they say, "Oh, well, this is slippery slope, yada yada yada." Quite honestly, we're talking about 1% of the population.
Right,
And even 10 years down the line, if you're going to pass this law and say, "Oh, well, we're preventing it for the future." It's going to be a handful of people. Like, you couldn't even fill a minivan with the number of people that'll be impacted
right,
directly by this over the next 10 years. And you just spent how much money and how much time debating this, uh, arguing this, going taking it through committee to impact 10 people maybe over the next 10 years.
right,
And if you want to talk about purely cynical, money based, economic, yada yada. Um, why are you wasting our money on something that'll impact 10 people when
mm-hmm,
we can't even get property tax? For example, in Hutchinson, um, we can't even lower property taxes. We can't
right,
even, we Kansas just was able to figure out how to drop its sales tax on groceries.
right,
I mean, these are things that impact the entire and disproportionately impact the poor because all of their income gets spent. They don't put money into stocks and bonds or whatever.
mm-hmm,
So you just improve their lives by 8 to 10% depending, because how much of that money is now you know not having to go into taxes. That should
I
have been
think,
addressed 20
hitting them
years
with the
ago.
pocketbooks is like an
Yeah.
amazing idea. And
Yeah.
instead of going this, because the empathy doesn't work with these people. They don't
Mm.
care about our lives, but they care about, where the money goes. Maybe she'll leave me alone for a minute. Um, um, but, I mean, I think that's, a valuable lesson, say, quit wasting our money on
Hmm.
this stuff. And you don't have to tell them that you have a trans kid or anybody
Right.
in the trans community. Just be like, quit wasting our money on this shit.
Yeah.
Why don't we deal with something that's important, like our economy or our healthcare? Not this crap. Leave it
Right.
alone and move on. Make your
Figure out
voices
something.
heard.
And that's really the factor here. Like, the fact is they want to waste their time on this so that they don't have to actually address things that improve most Kansans' quality of life. They want to get you
Right.
pissed off about stupid bullshit. I mean, it's our lives, right? So for us, it's
Right.
very intimate and personal. But if you want to if you want to look at this from the level of cynicism that even these people are sitting inside of, why the fuck are you wasting all of our money and all of our time on this when you could be uh, actually addressing the things that will move the needle for more Kansans?
Right.
I mean, when the dust settles, if you want to have a discussion and you want to have it in a practical manner, that is the argument to make.
I
Because
agree.
I mean, we've you and I have sat through these committee meetings of people who just won't even look us in the face, right?
Right.
We're making all the medical arguments in the world. We're pointing out all of the realities. And when it comes down to it, fine. You don't give a shit about us, that's fine. uh, stop wasting our money.
Right. Yeah.
Stop wasting
Make
our
it
money.
about the
Stop
money.
wasting our time, because time is money, and we pay you a shit ton of money to make lives better for all of
And
Kansas.
this is not making lives better from anyone.
No.
Who's this making lives better for?
Yeah.
Speaking of money, I do want to say something about something that we have. There's a couple grants for emergency
Mm-hmm.
grants, and so when I put out the links, I have to put space and things. So it puts out the web addresses, so you can't copy and paste. You will have to write it in. But the Trans Youth Emergency Project.org/Kansas. I will put that link in there, but you will have to, write it in. So, because I'll have to put some spaces, or else Spotify will not accept it. Um, but and we'll post that on our Facebook and our Instagram and our Blue Sky and our TikTok and all of that good stuff. All the places you can find us. Um, but you can go to that and you can apply for emergency grants if you need out of state care for your youth. And so there's a couple $500 grants and some more support for your families for trans youth.
Yep.
And so,
Because that is one good thing about this bill. There have been a lot of, for example, abortion bills and things like that, where they are penalizing people for leaving the state to get the health care they need. And fortunately, that is not happening with this bill. So if you are in a situation where you can get that health care in another state, then that is one thing that you can do to take care of your family if you are directly impacted by this bill. Um,
mhm.
so that is the first consideration. That is the first very practical thing that you can, look for in response to this bill if your family is impacted, is that you can get that health care outside of the state. Um, Unfortunately, that's not going to help in regards to things like the way your child is treated on a day to day basis, which this bill certainly gives permission to basically bully children who are not, quote unquote, in the norm. Um,
Right.
it literally keeps people from actually calling them what they want to be called, um,
Mm-hmm.
which is fucking stupid. But that is at least one practical thing that we have, that we have available to us, is being able to get the healthcare still in that manner. And there are also the people who provide this medical care are also on the ball, and they are working on ways to fight this bill as well. There's always, always, always stuff going on in the background that is being done both by the ACLU and by various medical and social justice organizations, that we're not going to always get really deep into for a variety of reasons.
Right.
Um,
But we're hoping that they can stall this and in court before. We do know that this is going to be in law next Thursday or the following Thursday, but we're hoping that some court case can stall it.
mm-hmm,
So, but it does allow for, I hate this, forced detransition of the kids, between now and December 31st of 2025, to allow them to get off medications and hormones and all of that fun stuff. I hate that, but it does. It's not a
immediate
direct stop.
stoppage.
Yeah,
Yep.
which is good that they didn't do that. So there's no major withdrawals with that. So at least they accounted for that.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to give them any credit for anything. Um,
Yeah,
so
but
so at least we don't have that.
yeah, it's not immediately stopping. The law goes into effect next Thursday, but uh, I December 31st, I think, is when they set
Yeah,
as
so
like.
it's next Thursday unless they run out of time, and then it'll be
Mm-hmm.
the following Thursday.
Yeah.
Um, so that's the inside word. but it's next Thursday unless there's some time gap of all the laws they're going to try to pass, and then it'll be the following Thursday for sure.
Mhm.
Um, and this episode will be out, the Sunday. So
Mm.
before so um, before it becomes law, um, and and that's what we're going to try to do. Is we're going to try to do up to date topics now on the podcast, and so I hope everybody stays tuned. Sarah will be our new co-host, and we're going to do up to date topics um, around the country, um, Kansas, queer and trans, all around the community. Not just political, some fun, but we are going to be more political. Um, with the political environment, we want you to be up to date on the news and what's going on. There's a lot to cover. I
Mhm.
took time off to have a surgery, and so I was off for the last 6 weeks. So I did a bunch of recordings in December, and so I have not been on a podcast for January and the first part of February. All of those recordings were done in December, so we have a lot to cover, Sarah. So
Mhm.
we've got a lot of work to do. So we might actually put out a couple podcasts a week. We'll see what happens, but we're gonna get caught up. We've got to talk about executive orders.
Mhm.
We got to talk about taking the TQIA out of stuff.
Mhm.
Um, we've got to talk about civil liberties, um, and maybe we'll put in some fun stuff about history of trans people and things or stuff like that in there too.
All
But
right. We could probably do some really good book recs.
oh yeah, absolutely. Um, but yeah, like us, share us, subscribe. We're on all your favorite channels and all your favorite ways to listen, and you can get links of all of this stuff down below. And where you can, we're looking for sponsors, we're looking for donations. Anything helps, and so we appreciate you tuning in and listen. We'll have another episode out next Sunday for sure, if not before. So
Yeah.
until next time, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, folks. Thanks for listening.